All right, so thank you all for joining today's webinar. As many of you have seen in the description, today's topic is on cybersecurity essentials. We're talking about all the different ways to kind of protect yourselves in the digital landscape we live in today. Unlike other webinars where there's a slide deck and a presentation, today's going to be more of a fireside chat with myself and Paige Adlington, who you can see here on the screen. Paige is senior manager at Charles Schwab. She is a rock star. She has helped our firm in a lot of different ways. So I'll let her introduce herself in a second. But today we're going to hit a few main areas, which is really how to protect yourselves in today's kind of really scary cybersecurity world landscape. Email best practices, password security, how to guard yourself and protect yourself so nothing fraudulent could occur on any of your accounts. And we'll talk about how certain demographics are more targeted than others. But it's a conversational format. So at any point in time, you want to raise your hand or ask a question, we'll make sure those get addressed or answered or resolved. So Paige, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Sure. So welcome everyone. I'm glad I got to join today. I am part of Schwab's business consulting and education team. And what that is I actually partner with firms and I help them in all things technology related. And one of the things in that area is cybersecurity. So I get to work with Aspen on sharing what I see as best practices, talking to those in the firm and letting them know what they should be doing and not doing. And then I get to talk to you. I get to talk to clients. I really encourage questions. It goes without saying that no question is stupid. I know that sometimes this topic can be very intimidating, but I have, there's questions across the board. So I really encourage if there's something that you want to ask, like ask it today. We're going to get it answered.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paige. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I went ahead and just now posed a question in the Q&A portion so people know where to find that. I'll go ahead and post one in the chat here in a second as well after I ask this first question so you can navigate that area if you guys are attending as well. The first question is specifically about the targeting of senior investors. We hear all the time, you see it in the news, kind of these horror stories or these situations where senior investors have been deliberate targets of fraud. Can you explain what Schwab is seeing out there and how senior investors or just folks in and of themselves can protect themselves on the internet?
Yes. So, at Schwab, we pay particular attention and even have special teams that help with senior and vulnerable investor fraud. And we've definitely seen an increase in this area. There's been lots of changes since COVID. I know we've used that as a benchmark, but there have been changes in people's relationships, their living situations, more knowledge, more people are online. And in particularly in that senior category, we definitely see people in the senior category being more online and more digital. So with respect to that comes a next level of security and understanding how to protect yourself. I will say that specifically right now, I am working with several firms where romance scams are extremely prevalent right now. I think about different ways that people are getting targeted. So one specifically is around romance scams, and this typically comes in the form of a WhatsApp message or a text and an email where they're specifically almost phishing. Like they'll say, "Hi, Louise," and it's to Susan, and then Susan will answer, and all of a sudden that starts a conversation. That's a very scary tactic that we see all the time, and that starts a conversation. But we don't always see it just with women anymore. It's definitely coming on the male side as well. So getting targeted that way. A lot of times this is an ongoing dialogue where then all of a sudden slowly they're asking for, maybe details about your life, your financial situation, then suddenly they need help. What's important is to really understand the red flags when somebody is communicating with you and what they're asking for. I would say that your advisors are very heightened and aware of this as well, and we work with them to help recognize those red flags and to potentially intervene on your behalf. So I always communicate to clients, I'm like, when those types of questions are getting asked, if there is a red flag they see, that's why, because they're trying to protect you, because we see it so often. There's also a lot of targeting around retired senior investors. with scams around Bitcoin. So something that we see all the time. Once again, I'm not trying to beat up on WhatsApp, but it is a very known source of fraud. And so if you're being reached out to, we see it all the time, investment proposals through WhatsApp. You get invited, I get invited to things all the time, around WhatsApp, like join this investment group. I will tell you that I could almost completely and wholeheartedly say 100% of the time they're fake. And they are trying to get you to transfer money in from a Bitcoin perspective. I was with a firm last week doing some compliance training, and immediately I had several advisors at that firm raise their hand to say, yes, I had a client that I had to say, this is not real. So there are really things that not only you need to question and investigate, but, work with your advisor on that. Also know that Schwab works very closely with your advisors to understand and put safeguards in place for you. So, I would just say that it's very prevalent. It's a targeted, group of society. And I don't see questions right now, but I'll refer back to I had a question not too long ago when I was speaking to clients, and a lovely woman on the front row said, I don't understand why they're going after me. I don't understand why I'm the target. And there's a very simple answer is that's where the money is. They're not going after targets that don't have money. They do their research and they go after people that they know have the funds to actually have the fraudsters attack you. That's a vicious way to put it, but it is true.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Now, on that same vein, for people who are targeted within the confines of Schwab, one thing that we're seeing a lot of is updating like trusted contact information. Can you kind of shed light on the importance of having a trusted contact on your account settings and your profile within the firm and what that looks like for you at Schwab?
So I highly recommend, if you weren't aware, both at Schwab and with Aspen, you can designate a trusted contact. And we say a trusted contact, but this person doesn't have the authority to move money, to trade, to change anything on your behalf, but they are a safeguard in case there's those red flags are recognized, or in case some activity that's very unusual is going on. That's a second person to reach out to say, hey, is everything okay? Do we need to go check in on this individual, or even just to pull into the conversation? So it's really imperative that you have that. I wouldn't even necessarily relate this just to senior or vulnerable investors. I recommend it for everybody. I have trusted contacts on my account. So this isn't relegated to just that senior category, but in case anyone has a red flag on somebody's account, it's somebody that you can reach out to. So I encourage it not only with Aspen to do it with your Aspen team, do it with Schwab, but it's even available at other financial institutions. So like if you have a B of A account or, a checking account at Chase, you can do that there as well. So it's able to like bring in the conversation. If you aren't aware, if you don't have that person on your account, absolutely nobody can discuss what's going on with your account due to confidentiality.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paige, for that.
Mhm.
We had a question come in the chat. Richard, we're gonna get to that in just a second because it kind of talks about best practices here momentarily. But on the vein of account security, one of the things that really we are incredibly mindful of, you, our client here at Aspen, that whenever it comes to wires or disbursements, we make sure to cross every T, dot every I. And I know we go above and beyond to make sure any disbursements are secure. But can you speak to the fraud that Schwab sees related to money movement, disbursement requests, and explain why it's so important that these requests are verbally confirmed by a team like Aspen or with an advisor and with a client?
Yeah, I will first say that from a Schwab perspective, we require a verbal authentication on behalf of you. That is, we ask the advisor, have you verbally talked to that client on this? There is somewhat of it's a must have. It's also the best practice. When it comes to verbal authentication, and we'll talk about it more, but email is literally just a completely invalid form of communication. There's really no other way to put it. We call it cyber public enemy number one. We consider, and advisors should consider, Every email is fraudulent until you prove it otherwise, and that's what we teach. So if you send in a request for let's move money via email, there's nothing to confirm that that is a legitimate email. I will tell you that a fraudster can jump in your email, and we see it all the time, and they will live in your email for months before they act on it. If you think about what is in your email, you may have scanned in tax records at some point. You may have taken a picture and emailed a copy of a check. You may have had communications between family members. There's all types of information in there. So it is completely, and we see it all the time, that a fraudster can build a complete profile, jump into your email, request transactions, even setting up new like money link accounts, and it be completely fraudulent. So, the requirement is to pick up the phone and call that client. And when you call that client, you're calling a known number, and you are verbally authenticating not only that you want to move the money, but the amount, potentially where it's going and why. Like there's more than just saying, yes, I was moving money. And I'll use that example because one of the biggest successful fraud attempts we see at Schwab is third party wires. And I will tell you that 99% of fraud, and I say successful fraud, that means money being lost, comes from email compromise. So imagine this scenario where you are buying a property, you're buying a new house, you've talked to your advisor, you've let them know, you've been looking for months. Meanwhile, a fraudster sitting in your account, they watch what you're doing. They've got like little notifications. Um, it's progressing along. You found a property, you're working with the title company, you're working with a mortgage lender. All this is happening via email. All of a sudden, they jump in and they will create and say, hey, we need to change the account number at the title company this needs to go to. Well, this is where your advisor picks up the phone and calls you and said, is this legitimate? There's a change going on here. You need to go the next level. You're like, well, it's been changed to this title company. Are you aware? Is this the actual account number? Have you verified that with the title company? We see it over and over again where in these types of transactions, the fraudster has jumped in via email, redirected to fraudulent accounts, and then that money is gone. It is almost
With an
impossible.
email that looks, smells, feels, tastes just like
Yes,
it came from the title company. Yeah.
absolutely.
And it'll be the
Absolutely.
domain plus one letter or something very subtle, correct?
Yes. Very subtle changes. You can actually, without getting too technical, if you see a from person in your email, you can click on their name and you can see the email that's behind it. So it's very easy to fake emails. And then in the background, there's just one little thing that's changed. So what's important out of this is one thing to know that email is a very risky way to do any transaction. Certainly very risky to send confidential documents because you need to assume that people are almost in your email or can see things. And then the next level is that it's not enough for somebody to just say, yes, I'm buying a house. It's let's go that extra step. Let's say, yes, I'm buying a house and yes, I want to move money and it's this title company. Okay, let's call the title company. We got an email changing the account number. Can you verify the account number that this is going into? Like that's the thorough process you have to go through.
And have them read the account number, not you read it off the
Yes,
email, correct? Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Okay.
If you
Thanks,
think about
Paige.
just this multi-level, it's kind of like a multi-level verbal authentication. Like you want to
Yeah.
dive into that detail and make sure that it's legitimate.
Yeah. Well, now, Paige, so many of our clients are retired, and we love it. We actually love seeing outflows from our firm insofar as we know that when we send our clients money, they're enjoying it, they're traveling, they're spending on their kids and their grandkids, or a Viking cruise, or this, that, or the other. Nothing brings us more joy than seeing our clients actually enjoy retirement. But with that means we got to send them money. And so oftentimes we have e-authorization for move money transactions set up well in advance. So can you explain like the importance of having kind of e-authorization linked to their Schwab accounts and how we know when we send them money it's done securely? Can you kind of talk about that feature within Schwab?
Yes. So I can't, say it enough that the safest way to move money is in that authenticated digital experience. So with e-authorization, we see no fraud related to those authentic transactions. And when I say that, the only time we have seen fraud is unfortunately when a family member was on the other side of that phone. And that kind of almost goes back into that vulnerable investor category. But when you initiate a digital move money securely with your advisor through Schwab, then it is authenticated on your phone or through that digital form where you're authenticating and saying, yes, there is me. There's no way a fraudster can jump into that transaction. In other words, the way Schwab authenticates that transaction, there's no way for that process to be changed. There's no way for it to go to a new phone number or somebody that's not listed. Like, it is a one-way secure path. And to that extent, yes, it is what we have seen as the most secure way that you can move money.
Perfect. Now we've had both Ken and Richard pose the same kind of question, both in the chat and the Q&A. So let's talk about, we're going to jump ahead. I know we had some questions coming that we talked about in advance, but let's go ahead and talk about emails and passwords. And so to kind of mesh both questions together, is there a third-party password generator that's easy to use? Do you like these third-party, kind of these LastPass, these different types of programs to make sure your third-party passwords are safe and secure? I know you can have the random password generator and vaults and this, that, and the other.
Mhm.
And to make sure I answer Richard's questions as well, with so many like different variations of username and passwords, what is the best way to minimize password risk and things like that? I guess these are all questions kind of muddied together, but I think you know where I'm going with it.
Yeah. So I'll just start with passwords in general. So it is true. I mean, we can't even really, how can we wrap our heads around how many usernames and passwords and accounts we have now, even down to the simplest thing of like reading the Wall Street Journal? Um, but I will start by saying that it's no longer acceptable to have like an 8-character password and like something where you change it every 90 days. We really look at best practices now as having like 12 to 15 characters, and it being unique across platforms. So I'm just going to start with that best practice. You need to have unique passwords that are at least 12 to 14 characters in length, and unique to that specific website. Now, yes, that's a lot, but that is the safest method. And the reason is because credential replay, and credential replay is where somebody gets a hold of that information from one location, maybe something simple like the Wall Street Journal, but then they say, hey, there's a very good chance they've used this on their financial accounts. So we're going to go try to use it there. We're going to go try to just, hit like a heavy target all of the spaces this person might be because we have that one username or password. And the chances are they'll get in somewhere. So that's why the uniqueness and the length are important. Then also I'll go to the next level. Beyond that, anywhere multi-factor or two-factor exists, you need to use it. Like, there's just almost no black and white these days on this. So when I say multi-factor or dual factor, that's, for instance, if you go log into a credit card and they say, okay, put in the code that we've sent to your phone that you have on file. That's multi or dual factor, where you're using something beyond your username and password to verify that it's you. Sometimes that's an app. Like with Schwab, there's an app and you have to put in the number. So if you think about layering, and then that final and most robust way to protect your username and passwords is exactly what Jim said, and that are password managers. And the short answer is we are a fan. We do recommend them. I always recommend that you do not use the free version. So if you think about a password manager or really any piece of software that you're using, when you get a free version, it doesn't mean that it's bad, but it does mean you have less security. That's effectively what the difference is. There's some functionality, but it's also security features. So if you're going to use a password manager, then definitely go for a licensed version. Not that expensive on a yearly basis. Some out there are Dashlane, OnePass. There's certainly quite a few great ones out there. Happy, post this conversation to share those with Aspen and then to share along with you guys that are listening. There's also people get really worried when they think about a password manager that, oh my gosh, I'm putting everything in one place. And what if I forget that one password? Or, what if something happens? Most of them have something called an inheritance factor. I call it an inheritance factor. So that is if somebody were to become incapacitated, if something were lost, you have another person that has been designated to be able to go and access that. So it's a little bit more than what we refer to as the trusted contact earlier, but that way there is like a backup to that manager. But
What
yes,
are your thoughts on what are your thoughts, like Ken's question, when Google says, do you want me to save your password? Like, and we're kind of getting, I don't want to get in the vein of like Big Brother, but do you recommend using a third-party provider or the one that your software, like a Safari or Outlook or Google, like they have kind of their embedded ones? What are your thoughts on that? And I mean, do you recommend using a third party or are they, I mean, it's free if you use Google, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
as long as so yes, those are good. So I'll go with the iPhone just because the majority of us have iPhones. I know not everybody, there's lots of Android users, but if you think about what they call keychain, or that is if you're on your iPhone and it says you want me to generate a password and you're like yes, and it stores it, yes, that's safe. And why is that safe? Because on your phone you are using a password. So you're punching in that code. That was the first thing I talked about. Second, it's usually using a biometric. So you got your face ID to prove that it's you. And then, before it punches in and uses that password that you've saved, once again, it's asking for your facial recognition. So it's encrypted. That's a good way to describe it, is those passwords are encrypted and safe on your phone. If somebody were to get your phone or get into your, say, break into your iCloud account, they don't have that second layer of dual authentication to have access to that encrypted data. So it's safe. It works much the same with Android devices like a Samsung Galaxy, which is ultimately what is using on the Google platform. So the
Yeah.
simple answer is you're effectively getting that same level of protection. Um, Oftentimes, what I will differentiate on those is they often let you use or designate your own username. That's where I would be cautious because even I can be guilty of it, of using my email over and over again in my keychain for that specific website. So, that's the only place I would be conscious, is if you want to have unique usernames, you do have to, there's a more manual process in that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I know you keep going back to the word layering, and I like that. It's just creating just one little layer of resistance every single time you do that. And so having two or three just creates it that much more difficult for anyone to try and infiltrate or attack a client's information.
Mhm.
To kind of circle back around, you touched on this before we kind of jumped on the password generator chain, but email was a big thing we mentioned before we kind of got into this password conversation. Email being cybersecurity public enemy number one. Can you explain what are some best practices people can do when it comes to safeguarding themselves while using email? While we know it's something that isn't safe and secure, we still all have to use email in a
Yes.
million different ways. So, what are some ways we can better protect ourselves and how we use email and how we interact professionally or personally with those accounts?
So, beyond passwords, password management and the security around your email, um, you know, you should consider email a postcard. So if you think about, I know, I mean, I still use postcards every now and then. They get used very often. But think about email as a postcard. So whatever you put on a postcard and you send it through the mail, every person that touched that postcard could read it. You need to think about email that way. So what does that mean? Don't put secure information in an email that's not encrypted. Think about, you can encrypt emails. Now that can get very technical, but you can take a step back. Think about portals. So, there's different avenues of sharing documents in a secure way. A lot of us have done mortgages or done, different financial transactions where that company is like, we're creating a secure portal for you to go put that information there. Those you need to always use wherever that is a availability to you. Don't put social security numbers in emails. Once again, would you do that and send it through email? Through a postcard that anybody could see. Think about your email as something that people are reading and act securely based on that. And then I say, wow, we are very reliant on email. but it's not a bad thing to pick up the phone and call. I mean, it's a really easy thing to do to tell something, confidentially over the phone to a known person. So, don't forget when you're thinking about doing transactions with your money, it's that serious to like pick up the phone and call somebody. Um, there's a couple other things I like to safeguard around email, and we'll jump on the Wi-Fi. So people ask me all the time, should I be using free public Wi-Fi? And I pretty generally say no, you shouldn't. But there are some caveats around that. So if you're at Starbucks and you jump on their Wi-Fi, there's nothing to say that it's a legitimate Starbucks Wi-Fi, because I can go sit in Starbucks and create a Wi-Fi and name it Starbucks 2, and I guarantee you half that room will jump on my Wi-Fi, and I can
Oh,
watch
that's
every training.
terrifying. You know it too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can watch every keystroke you're making, and I can capture every keystroke. So if you go to a website and you log into your account and you don't have two-factor authentication, boom, I've got your Chase credit card stuff, and I can go log in right after you.
Yeah.
So you can think of it that way. Now, once again, you can layer using public Wi-Fi by engaging a VPN. So you've heard that before. That's a virtual private network. A lot of these safeguarding services like LifeLock, or you might have seen Norton. It's a fairly inexpensive thing. So if you have to use public Wi-Fi and you need to do any type of secure type of transaction, then you should engage the VPN. Now, I'm not worried about you being on Wi-Fi at the gym or somewhere and you're listening to music. That's not where they're going to get you. What they really want to do is get access to your accounts. So
Yeah.
just want to be mindful of that. If you do need to do something financial or log into accounts, once again, that two-factor authentication, but also think about a VPN.
Yeah. So on that same vein with like protecting our devices using a third-party VPN, we're talking really about encrypting our devices, whether it's computers or mobile devices. Can you explain why encrypting things at large is a great idea, like why it protects us and our clients in a lot of ways?
Mhm. Um, I'll start with those devices that we have, the little mini computers. We'll go back to the phone. If you didn't know it, the data on your phones is encrypted by way of you creating that user ID or that passcode and also your biometric. So, for instance, on the iPhone, when you create those and then you lock it down, it's actually encrypting data on there. So, if somebody does steal your phone, it's really hard for them to get to the data. Same for an Android device. But now let's extend that to a laptop or a computer, so a desktop. Desktops are obviously a little less risky because you're not moving them around. They're not going to necessarily get stolen or left at an airport or at a coffee shop. Um, but on your computers, there's a very easy setting in the we'll start with Microsoft, with Windows, where you can encrypt data. Now, this just means when you lock your computer and you're using that password capability, all the data, all that secure information that's on your computers is just a big jumbled mess. So that if you lose it, nobody can use it. So think of it that way. When you encrypt data, whether it's on your phone, on a computer, or when we talked about encrypting an email like a VPN, all it's doing is scrambling all that information so that if a fraudster gets access to it, it's unusable. I'll extend that because having worked with Aspen, it's important for them and one of their best practices that they encrypt the data. So anywhere your data, your confidential information is stored, that data is encrypted. So, beyond the multiple layers of protection that they're putting in place on your behalf, there is that, next layer of protection in that if somebody ever got access to that data, it's encrypted. It's the same thing at Schwab. It's the same thing at vendors that Aspen uses where they're doing their due diligence. That data is encrypted.
Thank you, Paige. And I know it's a big point of emphasis when we go through technology updates and things like that. But on that same vein of updates, can you explain how important it is to regularly update your softwares on your phones and computers? I know my wife, she's there's two types of people in this world: the people who have alerts and it doesn't bother them, and then there's people who have 2,000 unread emails, and I think there's a healthy place in the world for both. But but when
Yes.
it comes to updates, can you talk about in the world of technology evolving as fast as it does, how important it is to make sure you're regularly doing updates on our phones and devices?
Yeah. So I'm maybe somewhere in the middle. You didn't exactly say where your wife lands, but I have my
Yeah.
suspicions because I can't handle the red dot saying I have something unread. It makes me crazy. So, but when you see that update on your phones, the red, there's an update available or on your computers, um, don't be mistaken in thinking that those updates are about giving you the best and new great emoji to use in your text message. Updates are done by those providers because they have found a security breach. They have found what we call is like a zero hole. And that is when they are constantly testing their software. So this is not only like an iPhone or an Android or, iOS or Windows. They are constantly testing software to see if somebody can break in. That's their job, is to make sure that that software, those platforms stay secure. So when they create updates, they are more than likely related to security patches. Now they're going to throw in some fun stuff on you. You're going to get, they're always going to bundle it into some other types of updates and technology updates. But ultimately, those are about securing a vulnerability that they've identified. So what does that mean? Do your updates. If it comes, it's on your phone. Do the update. It's timely as you can. I know when I first started at Schwab, and it's been almost 10 years, they would tell us to hold off on the update. Like, so our own IT people, because I have a company phone, would go and test that update. That doesn't even exist anymore. Like when there's an update, we do the update. Same thing on my computers. I don't have a choice. Schwab is going to push out updates to my Windows platform, to various pieces of software that I may have. It's automatically done for me. Now, it's a good thing if you can set it up on your own stuff to automatically happen. But outside of that, you do need to stay on top of it and you do need to make those updates. I know many of you might remember, it's been several years now, but there was a big Windows breach. It touched on a lot of international companies. It touched on a lot of hospitals, financial institutions, and it was related to Windows. And it was strictly because they had not done multiple Windows updates. And so fraudsters went and searched out firms and individuals who had not had not done the update and targeted that hole in that piece of software.
Wow. Thank you for that, Paige. I know you're right. You see them and you're like, what is it going to do now? Is it a new emoji? Is it this, that, and the other? But it's often a lot more secure than
It
that.
is. It is.
We've had two questions that have come through on this, and I don't want to put you in the spot here. Do you have any third-party VPNs? And it's okay to dodge it, but if there are any third-party VPNs you like or suggest, or does Schwab at large say, hey, these are trusted, or is that pretty hard to be put in a spot in that question?
There's lots of good ones out there. So I will start by, there's the big one out there. So I don't mind sharing what I use. I don't look at it like an endorsement. I say pretty neutral, but I have LifeLock, um, and I have, without admitting my age, I get the AARP discount, so I get the big package. So I get the VPN that like the Nord VPN, or there's Norton. There's lots of good ones out there. You might want to start by one. You should have antivirus software on your computer. So everybody should be using antivirus software. So if you've heard of like Bitdefender, there's several. A lot of times they partner with a good firm to offer you a VPN. So take advantage of that. So it's not that there's like this very special list, but I would go to known vendors. So look to who you already use your antivirus software and partner with them. Same thing, like I happen to use there's NordVPN or Norton and all the different ones, some of the bigger ones. I tend to learn towards the larger companies. I admit it, just because there's some tried and true. There's some history with them, some length of time. Um, you know, Go read reviews. I still think that's a good thing to do. I will emphasize here again, to always use a paid version. So oftentimes there might be a free version that you can use. Here's again where I say it's worth the money to spend, even if it's $100 a year, whatever it is, to go ahead and get a licensed version because you get more levels of security.
Perfect. And Connie had a great question, one that we definitely addressed or amongst our client base not too long ago. But there was an Experian, I guess hack or leak that came out not too long ago. Social Security is a big issue, right? So can you shed light on like Schwab's take on something like an Experian or a TransUnion or an Equifax if there's ever a data breach there? What are some ways that people can safeguard themselves? I know we can talk about freezes here momentarily, but if information ever gets stolen from a mass vendor like one of those credit reporting agencies in relation to the dark web, should clients be concerned? And what are some practical steps they can take to make sure they're in a good spot?
Yeah. So here's the reality is you need to assume that your confidential information, including your social security, is out there. It's such an easy thing to do these days, and there are so many breaches. Um, in a scary way, I say go with the mindset that your information is out there. And what you need to do is use all the protections you can to safeguard yourself. So it goes back to, passwords, not using public Wi-Fi, all of those things. Credit monitoring is huge these days. That doesn't mean you have to freeze because I can understand, depending on what your lifestyle is, maybe particular people with, that own businesses, what that could potentially do. But absolutely, you should be monitoring your credit so it gives you alerts. If you have the capability, just from strictly just doing your day-to-day business or your even like monthly financial business to freeze your credit, yes, I recommend freezing your credit. It's the simplest way to keep people from opening things in your name. And we see it all over the board. We see it happen all the time. Particularly, thorn in my side right now is AT&T because I get for a while there, the AT&T breach. I've gotten multiple alerts that they found my social security number on the dark web, and they will actually report how it was compromised, and it's come back to AT&T several times. So what do? I have credit monitoring in place. I have my credit frozen. But there's also something that people don't think about, and that is like checking savings, investment, tools. Those aren't really governed by necessarily credit checks. There's a whole separate system called CheckX, and CheckX is also a free place where it locks down being able to open a checking or savings or those types of accounts. And people are like, why would anybody go open a checking account in my name? I mean, they're just going to put money in it. It's because it's a way for them to establish a fraudulent account to do future fraud with. I worked with a particular advisor who had been compromised. They did freeze on their credit. Unfortunately, they got a notice from the IRS for a big tax bill because somebody had gone and created a checking account, which then they linked to a Venmo account, all fraudulent. And they started selling things on eBay. And on eBay, you're supposed to collect taxes, and they didn't. And they had a big business on eBay. So it got tracked back to that individual because that individual had opened a checking account under that person's social security number. So
Wow.
yeah, so they're tricky. So I recommend once again, I can share this after it's. I just saw somebody say it's CHEKX. But once again, we can share that information called CheckX, and it's a free service as well. And remember, the to lock your credit is free too. Don't let services come after you saying, "Hey, we'll lock all your credit and we're going to charge you this much." You don't have to do it. You can go to
Yeah.
them individually, do it yourself. It used to be kind of a pain to do it, like they didn't make it easy, but luckily laws have changed, and it's a much easier process to do that now.
I know I personally have mine frozen at all times. And then about 6 or 8 months ago, I had to get a new car. And they went to pull my thing and they're like, hey, your stuff's frozen. I was like, oh, I totally forgot. And it was it took me about 10 minutes. at a
Yeah.
dealership to unfreeze my credit, and then after they pulled it, I refroze it that afternoon or that next day. It was a very simple process. So if there's any clients on this call today or anyone who watches this online later, please let us know. We've done it several times for clients. We haven't done it personally. We've kind of walked through the steps to do it, and it won't take more than a few minutes to get it all completed. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that, Paige. So that addresses some of the questions. Please, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I know Paige is an open book, but one topic we have not addressed that does come up quite a bit as of late is the boogeyman, AI. And I am curious to hear your thoughts, or maybe you speaking on behalf of Schwab, maybe Schwab's thoughts about AI these days. What is an
Mhm.
important takeaway for us viewing today regarding the exciting and daunting breakthroughs that we're experiencing in technology through AI today?
Yeah. So I'll start with I'm extremely like fascinated with AI. It's kind of almost like a passion thing in me learning something new and how it's going to be used in the world. And I have worked with advisors that are using AI. So just a very brief tutorial. So we talk about AI in a very like common way, but we'll differentiate. There's AI where, like, let's say you want to talk to you're online and you get a chat bot. That's one form of AI. So you're putting questions in and it's responding to your question and getting you the right answer. That's one version. That's very common. We've had that. I mean, I could honestly say decades. We've had that type of AI that exists. You can, in some way, think of that as the phone trees when you call and you're like, and then you start screaming, or I do. I'm like, agent, agent.
I do
But
the
I mean,
same thing. I'm
that
so
is that
guilty of.
is
I just
AI.
press zero until a human starts talking to me.
So that's going to continue. In some ways, though, it's a very secure channel chat wise because it's a secure channel. Then what everybody's talking about today, that's all this focus, is like Chat GPT or Bing or Copilot. That is a different form of AI, and that is called a large language model. And when we talk about a large language model, that's where you can go into Chat GPT and you can say, you hear about the teenagers that are getting in trouble because it's like, write me a term paper on like Ben Franklin, and it comes back, and then their teacher finds out. Um, so those are tools that are really where, when we talk about AI, that's where the unknown is right now. What I can say is, if you use them in the right way, they are great tools. So if you wanted to write a thank you note for somebody that sent you flowers and you wanted to make it lengthy, you could go out and say, "Hey, write me a thank you note," or write me some kind of proposal, and it gives you all this good information. But what you need to remember is it also learns from you. So while you're getting data from it, be careful what you put into it. So when I see advisors using it, my caution to them, and it would be to you too, is you don't put confidential information into your AI, your chat GPT, because once again, this is just a giant database, like a giant brain. So if you were to say, hey, create a proposal using my social security number and my checking account so that I can send it to B of A, you've now put that out into the universe that somebody else could say, hey, go pull social security numbers for everybody that's over 55. Da, 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 da. It can do that. It'll use that information. So we talk about guardrails. For firms like Aspen, I talk about acceptable use policy. So you need to understand how and where you can use it appropriately. And that's something that we talk about so that it's just not, going cowboy out there all over the place, so that they know who's using it and they're not using your information incorrectly. And for you as you individuals, it's a great tool. Use it wisely. But the caution is remember, whatever you're getting from it and whatever you're putting into it, it's a reciprocal relationship. They're going to use what you're using.
Thank you for that. I know my wife used her friend had told her about it, and so she said at one point, she said, "Hey, create like a keto based, some kind of diet based
Mhm.
meal plan for a week just to see." And then the next question was, great, turn that into a grocery list and like
Yeah.
list of ingredients. I was like, oh, this is fascinating. Like, there are, we at our firm at Aspen, we do not use it in any capacity for our clients. We just want to play the conservative card for as long as we can, and we just maybe we have a boogeyman kind of thought about it. But I do think it's becoming more prevalent, and there's ways and mediums in which you can use it in a safe manner. I just want to make sure our clients know not to use it for any of their personal or sensitive information, and that's the
Yes.
position we've taken as a team as well.
Yeah. A good extra example along your lines, Jim, is, I've seen people say, go create me an itinerary to go to Italy for 10 days. That would be a
Oh,
really
neat.
neat thing. So you can say, hey, go create an itinerary for Italy. We want to at least see Venice, Rome and Pompeii, whatever it is. That's great. But don't say, we want to go to Italy on these days. My name is, we're flying on American Airlines. Like, don't put that out into the universe.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much. Are there any other topics that have come up for you that you'd like to address or maybe talk about with our clients that you're seeing in the landscape today regarding, breaches and security and how the clients can keep themselves safe? Or any closing remarks you'd like to make as we kind of wrap things up today?
Yeah. Um, I think if I could, I used to say there's three things that I always want clients to do, and the first is robust passwords, and so we've talked about that. Um, the second is, be no public Wi-Fi, or if you have to use public Wi-Fi, then secure it. And then the third thing that I haven't mentioned yet is I call it my don't respond policy. So when I call it a don't respond policy, that means if anybody ever reaches out to me via text, via phone call, or via email in relation to a transaction, I do not accept that as a legitimate source. I either hang up the phone or I ignore the text and I call the legitimate source. You don't have to respond to an email or a text or a phone call. Let's say if your credit card got compromised, you can call the legitimate number, and that's what you need to do. Most recently, I got a text from Chase and it said, we suspect fraud on your account. Call us on this number. I'm like, yeah, I don't believe that. And then they called me, and I said, I appreciate you calling me. I said, if this is legitimate, then you won't have a problem with this, but I'm going to hang up and call the number on the back of my Chase card. And I did. And the guy at Chase was like, yeah, it's totally fraud. We did not reach out to you. There's nothing going on in your account. And that guy had almost started yelling at me, like, which was another red flag. I knew this was fake, but like, I didn't have to respond to him. I called the real source. The same thing. If you got an email from Aspen saying, hey, could you shoot us over your social security number? You don't have to respond. In fact, don't pick up the phone and call,
Mm,
Aspen, call Jim, call client service and say, hey, did y'all send me an email? Do you need my social security? There's nothing that says you need to react. So that's what I call like robust passwords and all that layering, public Wi-Fi, lock it down. And then third, like what I call the do not respond tactic.
I love that. Well, Paige, thank you so much. This has just been a wealth of information for our clients. I know it's really important for maybe not our clients, but maybe our clients have aging parents as well who are going through this and they can relay the information they learned today with their loved ones. So thank you so much for taking the time. Everyone
Absolutely.
today, thank you for either listening today or watching tomorrow or when this becomes available on other channels. And we really appreciate you all for being here.
Thanks, everyone.